Chapter 7. "Come on," she said, while at the very edge of her vision the swing in the garden continued to sway on its distant tree. "Come on," she said in her head to the backwoods girls, and she led them from the empty room, through the schoolroom with its desks bolted to the floor, along the hallway with its rows of closed doors, down the stairs, and into the front hall. "Look," she said, lifting a green velvet hat from an arm of the mirrored clothes rack and pulling it over the curlers in her hair. "See how lovely I am?" And she turned her face from side to side in the mirror. "Ooh, lovely," they all answered. "And look, there's another lovely person with a hat just like yours." "Yes, another person. And look, she does what I tell her to." "Go away!" she ordered into the mirror, and the image disappeared as Maggie conducted the 5 girls with their dirty, inquiring little faces along a hall, through a door, and into a blaze of light. The garden. "Oh, how wonderful," she almost said herself as she glimpsed for the first time the proportions of the grounds behind the building. Less a garden than a meadow, it stretched far into the distance, with clumps of trees here and there, occasional flower beds blazing with the reds and yellows of September, and far off to the right, a stand of white trees casting lacy shadows on the grass. It was a good garden, she decided, better than most. She stepped cautiously out into the sun, turning once to glance at the building behind her, to catch sight maybe of a vanishing face. But the windows were blank and the wall silent. The garden, too, was still. The immense lawn, from the doorway where she stood to the distant rim of woods, was quiet, and only the swing, empty and lifeless, stirred in the breeze. "What's that?" the backwood girls asked as Maggie picked through the damp grass in her silver shoes. "That's a swing," she answered. "You sit on it and you push your feet back and forth and you go higher and higher in the air. Come on, I'll show you how. First you, Kate." And she gave the swing a heavy push. "Put your feet up when you go forward and down when you go back. Now you, Elizabeth." In the next moment something snapped, tore, pulled away, and the wooden seat danced crazily from one rope. The other had broken and it twitched now in the dust like a dying snake. "Oh," the girls all said. "What happened?" "It broke," Maggie answered. "It doesn't matter. It was a dumb swing. And now," she added, leading them all the way, "look at these. These are roses. And these," she paused. They had come to the group of white trees Maggie had seen from the doorway, and she felt strangely drawn to them, as though they had been set aside for her as a private room. She knew their name. She had the little girls ask, "What are these?" So she could answer, "Birches." And she went on, "But no one is allowed near them except me. They're my private area, my private trees, and you can't come near. Anyway, you're too stupid and dirty to be here." She was tiring of their company, and she wanted to be all alone so she could enter the shade of the white trees that seemed only hers. "Go away now," she commanded, and in an instant the 5 little girls returned to their home in the backwoods, where they would wait until she had something else to display before their wondering eyes. The air was cool, and the wind penetrated the sleeves of her blouse, but she left the small warmth of the sun on the lawn and sought the windows. The air was cool, and the wind penetrated the sleeves of her blouse, but she left the small warmth of the sun on the lawn and sought the shadows of the birch branches that crossed and recrossed one another on the ground, enfolding her like some giant web. She imagined herself to be a spider, following with the toes of her silver slippers every woven thread until she grew dizzy, and she sat down between 2 trunks of pocked white bark. It was nice being among the trees. It was like having a house of your own. Idly she gathered some long sticks and laid them end to end to mark off separate rooms on the grass. The bedroom would be over here, against this tree. The kitchen, here. This would be the living room, where she was sitting. This rock would be the table, and the little mossy mound over there could be the chair. The grass could be the rug. All at once a door slammed shut somewhere and a cry went up, "There she is!" And in an instant the shadow ribbons on Maggie's arms and legs were invaded by a spread of new shadows. Massive heads, arms, bodies, legs, and 4 hands were upon her, pulling her to her feet and dragging her across the lawn back to the school building. "That's my hat!" One aunt was crying. "Take those curlers out of your hair," the other shouted. "She smells of perfume. She's got my necklace on. Look, she's stolen my necklace." "Look at my evening shoes. They're all wet. What are you going to do with my evening shoes? Take off my shoes. Take them off. You're ruining them. Look at those feet and my shoes." "The upstairs is a shambles." She left water running in the tub. She muddied up the towels. She tracked up the upstairs hall. She broke the window curtain pull. She threw the keys on the bathroom floor and left all the doors open, even their door. And after we gave her all those clothes and the doll, after I bought her that doll, she's a disgusting child. Disgusting. Enchanting. Maggie looked up quickly at this new tone in the storm of anger surrounding her. Absolutely enchanting. Uncle Morris was standing in the doorway. "Stop!" he commanded, and she didn't know whether he was directing his order to her or to some of her aunts. "Stop right where I can see you. Good. I want to admire the effect. Step a little to the left now. Oh, perfect," he said. "Perfect. A silver slipper on her foot, a ruby at her throat." Maggie stole a look at the necklace with its single red stone. Was it really a ruby? And at the evening slippers on her feet. The satin was darkened now with water and streaked green with grass juice. "And blossoms to her hair," Uncle Morris continued. "Be still, Morris." It was Aunt Lillian speaking now. "She's stolen Harriet's necklace and ruined my best shoes and destroyed half the house, and you stand there reciting poetry." It did sound like poetry, a little, and Maggie wondered if someone had really written a poem about a girl who looked just as she did now, with a ruby bead at her throat and silver slippers on her feet. And blossoms. What were the blossoms? Oh, the curlers, the pink curlers, the blossoms to her hair. "It was a mistake to bring her here. I told you, Morris, that would be a mistake." "Take her back to her room," Aunt Harriet said. Fingers were at the back of her shoulders now, and she shrank away, but someone was holding her still as the hat was taken from her head, the curlers tugged from her hair, the slippers pulled from her feet, and the tiny gold clasp at the back of her neck unlocked. Maggie was glad that the other girls in the school were not in sight. They would remember a scene like this and remind her of it later on. They would think up a name that would sting her with its memory and among themselves, but within her hearing. They would talk about this moment when all the things she had put on were torn from her body at once. "It was a mistake bringing any child here for so many years," Aunt Lillian was saying, "but this one is the worst. I knew the moment I set eyes on her she'd be impossible to handle." "Impossible," Aunt Harriet agreed. "It was a mistake to consider it." "Impossible to handle," Aunt Lillian repeated. "She should have been sent to some boarding school with trained supervisors to look after her." "We're too old to take on such a burden ourselves." Maggie stared at them. She should have been sent to a boarding school? Then what was this? And she looked from one face to another until she understood at last that this was not a boarding school after all. There were no other girls here. The dormitory rooms upstairs were bare and their closets empty because no one lived in them. This was the house she had been promised all along, this great stone building, and she would live in it with no one but her 2 aunts and her uncle and the backwoods girls who spoke only silently in her head.